Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and Metal Gear Rising, a fundamentally bonkers game, confidently so, rightfully so. And of course, got to talk about the full title of Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance. That aside, though, this is how this video is going to go. I'm going to talk about Metal Gear Rising and how math is at its core, and how it impacts different parts of the game, and also talk about math in the meta sense and how it surrounds the game. Now, as we go on, I will be talking about how I feel about the game and my experiences with that. I replayed it recently, and so yeah, it's given me a lot to think about. And for the story, I would assume spoilers ahead. I won't get into anything too heavy, and honestly, I don't think the story is the point of that game. Although the one that they have, it's all right. But I do want to talk about a couple things and a couple characters in that game. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. And remember, spoilers ahead. Just assume that. Okay, so with Metal Gear Rising, one of its biggest points in part is the combat and the flexibility that you have in that and all the fun that can be had. And there's a lot of math in that. And it's crazy to me because one of the biggest parts of the game is that you can cut almost anything. And as you're going throughout the game, you're fighting your opponents, and there's math in the combos that you use. There's math in the timing of those combos. There's math in you blocking your opponent's attack, and if you time it just right, there's math in that timing and the resulting parrying, right? And that's a big part of the game. And parrying is very helpful. And then there's the blade mode, right? And with the blade mode, it allows you to enter this mode where you can more precisely cut up things, right? Whether we're talking about items or opponents. And here's the thing about that blade mode, it's inherently mathematical. It's mathematical in the sense that it slows things down, and allows you to take your time with things, but it's mathematical in what it is, right? Because it allows you to slow things down and also see like a plane that you can more precisely align your cuts with. And in essence, when you think about it, it allows you to use geometry to decimate your opponents. It's using math to just body your opponents. Like it's crazy when you think about it, and it's pretty cool. And so in blade mode, you can do a number of different things. But like I said, the big thing is like allowing you to more precisely align your cuts and take some time with that. And in doing so, one of the things that it allows you to do is to cut off like limbs or parts of your opponent. And you could do a Zendatsu. And when you do the Zendatsu, it allows you to like refuel your energy. And so, with that in mind, there's math and how you dish out damage and how you take it. There's math in your health, right? You want to ideally not get hit, but if you do, you want to keep an eye on that, and you can do that through the health bar, which is a visual representation of the amount of damage that you've taken and how much health you have left. And you could restore that by doing a Zendatsu and taking out like a material from your opponent and healing back up, or you can use a repair paste. And for your blade mode, it's not an infinite thing inherently, right? So you have an energy gauge of sorts for that. Um, and that energy gauge, it gets drained the longer you use blade mode, so you can run out and not be able to do it. Later on, you get a mode called Ripper mode, which pretty much makes you stronger, and that's also reliant on that energy gauge. So there's math in that. There's math in the weapons that you're using out the game. You have different weapons. You have your main primary sword, which is usually some form of high frequency blade. And then you have different weapons that you could accrue by defeating the bosses. And yeah, and there's math in all that. There's math in the weapons themselves, the combos they allow you to do, mixing and matching those weapons. But there's also math in getting them because you have to defeat the bosses. And each of these bosses, you're gonna try a different strategy, but it's a good idea to have like be paying attention, but also have like items in place. And with items, there's math in those, right? There's math in what they do. There's math in storing them because you can store a certain amount of items, sub weapons like grenades or rocket launchers, and yeah. So there's math in that, and just so far, we talked about several things, but the idea is like there's math at every corner, and I think that's cool. And it's such a combat heavy game, and so like not only is there math in the combos and the time that you're doing that while you're playing, there's also like math in any like quick time event that you might have to do, and there's math in fighting the boss fights, not just because of the strategy or strategies that you have to use and the strategies that they're using, but there's math in their health, and sorry, there's math in their health, right? And trying to deplete that, right? And so you're doing this back and forth, and you're practicing resource management, seeing what you can do. If there's different items in the game, or sorry, in these boss fights that pop up, you want to keep track of those. And there's just like a map of keeping track of it all and being able to dish out the damage while not taking as much, right? And then there's math and just everything that surrounds all of that, right? Because like take the codec conversations. There's math in like how those are stored, sure. Like each number represents a channel for a different character, right? But there's math in how those conversations function and flow and when they pop up in the story. And I think that's all pretty interesting. And there's a lot of math that goes into designing that world and the effects that come in the world, right? Because there's math in, yes, making the buildings, making the different environments, but also the effects that go on in those environments, like how light is reflected off of certain things, like how light is reflected off of water. And I think that's pretty cool. It's just like we don't always think about it, but yeah, there's math in that. Um, and for the environment in itself, just outside of the math that goes into constructing it, it's like constructing it specifically to be mostly destructible, right? Because you can cut through most things in Metal Gear Rising, and that's really cool. And there's math in that to design how that environment will stand up to potential damage, and I think that's pretty cool. And with Metal Gear Rising, it was published by Konami, but developed ultimately by Platinum Games. And it's kind of funny because like I when I describe Metal Gear Rising, I say it's like Metal Gear meets Devil May Cry, and I feel like because of Platinum Games involvement, that justifies me in saying that even more. Because if you didn't know, Platinum Games, like there's CEO was the main person who worked on Devil May Cry, like the initial one, with his team. Um, so I feel like that kind of rings true, and it really works for the title. With that in mind, I'm trying to think of anything else that I might think of. Well, I mean, those are major points. Just like there's this math and everything I just said. There's math in the deal that Platinum Games would have had to make with Konami. There's math in the marketing and the budget associated with the game. And one of the cool things about the game is like, you accrue battle points as you go on defeating your opponents and being stylish. You get ranked after each conflict and award a certain amount of battle points, and you can use those battle points to power up Raiden and get different techniques um, and enhancements to like health and energy. And one of the things that was an unlockable that you could get was the Gray Fox suit and the Fox Blade. But the crazy thing is, like, even if you got that, you still had to use battle points to actually fully unlock that and be able to use it in the game, which it like costs 200,000 battle points, which takes you a while to accrue. but it is worth it. And with the Fox Blade, it allows you to just cut through armor like it's butter. It's crazy, and it's awesome. And I like the Gray Fox suit because Gray Fox is my favorite Metal Gear character. Um, but that being said, right, there's math across the board, and given how combat heavy it is, I think it's awesome that a lot of the math is actually at the forefront. There's a lot behind the scenes too, but it just kind of hits you with it because you have to um, master the art of combos and timing and blade mode and anticipate your enemies and what they're going to do. Look at their strategies and formulate your own, all the while accruing battle points and upgrading yourself throughout the game. It's a very mathematical process. And again, like I was saying earlier, with blade mode, you are using geometry to decimate your opponents, math to body them. It's crazy. And as for my opinions on the game, if you couldn't tell by now, I dig it. I dug it back in 2013 when I played it like the first time. And I dig it now because I replayed it this year, like 10 years out. It's kind of crazy. And every time that I played it throughout those years, um, I've never had a bad time. And I think it's interesting because like the game itself isn't like horribly long, but I don't think that's inherently a problem, right? It depends on what you get out of that experience, and I'd argue like replay value, right? Because I feel like there are some games that can be monstrous in length, and sometimes that works out. But sometimes you're not necessarily in a rush to replay them, right? But if you've gotten like 100 hours out of a game and it was like really good, I feel like that's fair. And for a short game, if you got a good experience out of it, sure. But because they're not cheap, I'd argue, at least for me personally, I want to see some replayability. I think when I first played Metal Gear Rising, it took me um, maybe around 10 hours, maybe less. Um, because I took my time with it. But even with that, right, like being a fairly short game, it has a lot of replay value. And for me, that's the clincher. Because, like, I may have spent like 10 hours or so that first time, but then I've gotten several more hours out of it since, right? To say the least. And so, and with what I just said, right? There's math in that too, right? Math in how long a game is, how it's designed, and what you get out of the experience. And you as a player have your different tastes and your different qualifications, and you got to decide is a game worth it for you? Because you might see a 6 hour game and you might be like, okay, that's fine, but you might be like, okay, no, I need something longer. But again, in the case of Metal Gear Rising, what it lacks in length, it makes up for in replayability. And I think like game length is an interesting thing because um, short games can work, long games can work too. But what I think is like fascinating is like, there's no real price adjustment, right? Because I could have a game that's like 6 hours, and it might cost like $60 for instance. I know some things have changed recently, but let's just say $60, right? But then I can get a game that's like maybe hundreds of hours, and it can still be $60. But I can have that game that's like 6 hours be something that's just like full of content and heavy replayability. And then I might have a game that is 100 hours and maybe it's good, maybe it's stuffed with amazing content, but it could also be quite empty. It depends on the game, it depends on how it was developed. And you as a player, you got to figure some things out, right? Because you're putting in time, you're putting in money, and they're just math in all of this. And I think that's cool. And there's math in how you choose to play. Because yes, you're for Metal Gear Rising in particular, like yes, you're following certain things and certain missions, but you can make certain decisions, right? You can decide what you're going to spend the battle points on. You can decide how you want to play the game, how you tackle different bosses and enemies, right? And there may be some cases where certain things may work better, but it's up to you to figure that out and figure out what you want to do. And I think that's cool. And with gaming, it's just like it's a beautiful thing to me because it's math and art and action that you can interact with, and I think that's amazing. So with that in mind, Metal Gear Rising is a fun game, and I think I have to mention it. So it is fundamentally bonkers, not just because of the gameplay, although like on that alone, I'd argue, yeah, but the story is crazy, right? It's like I feel like for the most part, it's pretty Metal Gear ish like plot, but like it plays around with like being crazier, or at the very least, like more openly crazy and not taking itself seriously. Because I do feel like, yes, Metal Gear has like this kind of tongue in cheek thing going on where it doesn't always take itself too seriously. But I feel like over the years it kind of does. And with Ryzen, it just like it understands that it is fundamentally bonkers and it has fun with it. And one of the cases that stands out that I'm sure like a lot of people on the internet have seen, even if they haven't played the game, is the character of Armstrong. Because it's like when you meet this dude, he's just an evil senator, he's all serious and whatnot. But then you go on the course of the game and you find out this dude is out of his mind in every way, and like he digs it, and it's like the most hilarious thing. And I know that you all know this one, but there's a point where he's doing crazy things and Brian's like, how are you doing that, or something to that effect. He's like, nano machine, son. It's great. Um, and overall, like I think it's an interesting game because there are some points where it's serious, right? But it absolutely does ridiculous stuff, and it understands that it's doing ridiculous stuff, and it's confident with it. It's confident about it, and I think that's pretty cool. So that's about all I have to say about Metal Gear Rising. This is the first longer video that I've done in a while, so I'm adjusting to that. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come away with a different perspective. And once again, I want to say, with Metal Gear Rising, notably with Blade Mode, you're using geometry to decimate your opponents and math to body them overall, right? And I think that's really cool. I'll see you in the next one.